Hey, this is Lauren Zachary with Motion Science, and today I'm going to share with you how I gather and use reference for all my creative projects. Quick disclaimer before getting into the video. After years of working in After Effects professionally as a motion designer, what I'm about to show you is the way that has worked for me. Feel free to adapt any step to your own projects and creative needs. The first pitfall to avoid is to spend too much time browsing for reference and never starting the actual project. To make sure you're not endlessly browsing the web for images, set a time constraint. The sooner you start creating, the better. The second mistake I notice people make is to only look at motion design projects that inspires you. To come up with original ideas, you can look for inspiration outside of your field. You can find inspiration in architectures, looking at buildings, various concrete textures, and try and find a story that connects these elements together. You can also look at nature, animals, plants, trees. One of my personal favorite is to listen to music. I often get inspired by a song or an instrumental that matches the mood of the piece I'm trying to create. You can also find your own reference through photography and filming your own footage. All of these elements may help generate interesting ideas for a story or a new creative project. When it comes to note-taking, one of the benefits is to free clutter from your mind. Once you start writing down ideas, you can say bye to creative block. I think it's important to have a system in place that works for you. In this next part, I'm going to show you the apps that I use to organize all of my creative ideas. The first app that I use is Workflowy. Workflowy is an amazing way to keep track of lists, creative briefs, brainstorm ideas, track deadlines, share boards with clients in an easy and intuitive way. I highly recommend it. For a paid alternative, you can use Milanote, which is equally awesome in its own way. Before even starting a project, the first thing I do is to analyze the brief thoroughly. Look for keywords in the brief. Who's the target audience? Is there any creative direction? Are there things you have to include or exclude from the project? And of course, what are the deliverables? Once I have an understanding of the brief, I can start brainstorming. In this phase, any and all ideas are valid. Don't discard anything yet. Here's an example of what a brainstorming session in Workflowy can look like. For my last StyleCraft assignment, I had to make a title for the Twilight Zone episode Time Enough at Last. I gave myself a time limit to write down keywords for the project, as well as ideas for texture, typography, color, effects I could use in After Effects, and animation ideas. While I didn't use every one of these effects and ideas, I found it interesting to go back to whenever I was in need for inspiration. After brainstorming, I will start gathering images for visual inspiration. When it comes to visual reference, I like to go on Pinterest first, then Behance or Instagram. You can also use AI to generate ideas you would have never thought of before. For this, you can use Midjourney or DALL-E 2. To make mood boards, I love using PureRef. This is a free software that you can get on pureref.com. It's an infinite canvas where you can add images and notes and organize all your inspiration in one place. When it comes to mood boards, you can have one massive board with all your inspiration, or the way I like to work is to have one board per category. Let's say one for type, one for texture, one for color, and so on. In this next part, we're gonna look at a case study of the Screen Graphics Workshop by Motion Science. For this case study, let's quickly go over the creative brief. Then, we'll see how I gathered and used reference for this project, taking it from an idea to a finished piece. Here, I had to create 3 style frames and 1 finished motion test. The star map screens convey complex decoded data on unknown star systems. I had to consider the mapping elements, solar systems and nebulas, measurement and direction systems, grid systems, shapes, depth and blur, typography, and it had to have a handheld motion. For the tone, mood, and style, it had to have organic and circular shapes, moody analog texture, and simple colors, 2 to 3 tones. Based on this creative brief, I started gathering images for visual inspiration. Let's look at my workflow when it comes to designing mood boards. I first went on Pinterest and created this screen graphics board where I pinned everything that I found visually interesting. This took some time, but I did set myself a time constraint. In the same way, I created this retro board with retro elements I found to be visually interesting. From there, I jumped into Pure Ref and drag and dropped the images from Pinterest that were most inspiring to me. The goal here wasn't to get inspired by one piece in particular, but to take inspiration from, let's say, this piece here with elements from this board over there and mix it with maybe some symbols you like on this board here. You can then try and make something that is truly original and that no one has seen before. If you want to save all the images you've imported into Pure Ref, you can press Ctrl A to select them all, right-click, save, export, and save all images to a designated folder. When it came to designing the wireframe, I was inspired by these two pictures and their original sci-fi retro layouts. For this left part, I was inspired by this grid and all of the other similar grids with sharp or rounded corners I found on these boards. For the style frames, you could see how I gathered and used all this inspiration to create these final designs. You can see the typography, depth and blur, simple colors. You can also see the round circular shapes and UI elements in the background, some moody analog texture, as well as star maps, all to create this final motion test. As you can see from this case study, everything is already made, but not by you. I took elements from one board and another, putting them together to create something new and original to me. I want to encourage everyone to use reference as a starting point. Then you can experiment with it and make it yours to come up with truly original ideas. I also can't stress the importance of using your notes as a guide throughout your project. I constantly reference them to make sure I'm still on track with the creative brief. It's easy to get carried away in your work, but always make sure you have the brief in mind, whether it's your own or a client's. I hope you liked this lesson and learned something new today. If you did, leave a comment below. Until next time, this is Lauren Zachary with Motion Science.